My name is Arman, and until recently, my life was quietly predictable. I lived in a modest two-bedroom home with my father and stepmother on the outskirts of town. The house sat at the edge of a sleepy lane where everyone knew everyone, and secrets had a habit of whispering through open windows. I was 17, caught between adolescence and adulthood, trying to make sense of a world that often offered no explanations. My father, Rajiv, was a stern yet loving man. A mechanical engineer by trade, he often left home before sunrise and returned well after dusk. He carried the weight of two lives, his own and the one my mother left behind when she passed away 8 years ago. When he remarried, I didn't protest. I understood that loneliness is a slow ache, and he deserved a second chance at happiness. Priya, my stepmother, entered our lives like a calm breeze. She was soft-spoken, impeccably dressed, and always precise with her words. We maintained a polite distance, never hostile, never affectionate. She treated me more like a polite tenant than her husband's son. I never felt warmth from her, but I didn't expect it either. We shared space, not stories. The neighbor, Mr. Dev, though everyone simply called him Dev, lived just across the street. He was tall, well-built, and always smiling. I noticed how often he found excuses to drop by, borrowing sugar, asking for help with his internet, or simply offering mangoes from his garden. I never thought much of it. In our neighborhood, hospitality blurred the lines of privacy. Still, sometimes I caught glances exchanged between him and Priya, brief, unreadable. I brushed it off. My mind had other things to focus on: exams, college applications, and the feeling that I was growing up faster than I could manage. One Friday evening, my father received a phone call. A machine failure at his factory required his immediate attention. He packed a small bag, kissed Priya on the forehead, and told me he'd be back Sunday night. His absence wasn't unusual, but that weekend, something felt different. The air in the house seemed heavier, as though holding its breath. Priya made dinner that night, dal and rice, her go-to comfort meal. We ate in near silence, the clinking of cutlery louder than usual. She smiled at me once, but it didn't reach her eyes. I returned to my room early, telling myself I needed rest. But I couldn't sleep. A strange unease gnawed at my thoughts, refusing to let me drift into dreams. I didn't know then that by morning, everything I understood about trust, family, and the people I shared my roof with would begin to unravel. And it would start with a sound, soft, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. The rain began around midnight, a soft patter at first, growing steadily into a rhythmic drumming against the tin roof. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows from the street lamp slicing across the walls. Something about the night felt off. Not eerie, just strangely alert, as if the house itself had woken up to watch. Unable to sleep, I rose to fetch a glass of water. The hallway was dim, lit only by a flickering bulb near the kitchen. As I passed the living room, I caught a glimmer, light dancing where it shouldn't have been. I paused. The door wasn't fully closed. It was open just enough to see inside. At first, I thought the television was on, but there was no sound, just the low murmur of voices. Then I saw them. Priya sat on the couch, her posture loose and unguarded in a way I'd never seen. Dev was beside her, too close, their knees nearly touching. They weren't talking anymore. His hand brushed a strand of hair from her face with the familiarity of someone who had done it many times before. She didn't flinch. She smiled. I froze. My breath caught mid-chest. I knew I shouldn't be there, but I couldn't move. What I was seeing felt unreal, like a scene from someone else's life. Then, in one fluid motion, she leaned into him. Their closeness became undeniable. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, only intimacy, the kind reserved for lovers. His arm wrapped around her shoulder, her head rested on his chest. It wasn't the physical contact that struck me the hardest. It was the comfort, the ease with which they belonged in that moment, as if my father had never existed, as if our home had never been built on love, trust, and second chances. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound, retreating into the safety of darkness. My heart pounded so loudly I feared they might hear it. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, water glass trembling in my hand. My mind reeled. Questions came like a flood. How long had this been happening? Was my father completely unaware? What did it mean for all of us? I stared at the wall for what felt like hours, the rain masking the silence. The image of them together etched itself into my memory with cruel precision. A betrayal doesn't need a confession. It announces itself in gestures, in glances, in the spaces where truth quietly dies. That night, sleep never came. I had seen something I couldn't unsee, and from that moment forward, nothing in our home felt familiar anymore. The morning after felt hollow. Sunlight filtered in through the curtains, casting warm tones over a cold reality. I sat quietly at the breakfast table, mechanically stirring my tea. Priya moved around the kitchen with effortless grace, humming to herself as if nothing had shifted in the world the night before. She greeted me with her usual softness. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded, lying with my eyes. Everything about her that morning seemed too normal, too rehearsed. She didn't meet my eyes for long, didn't linger in conversation. There was no trace of guilt, no flicker of discomfort. But I noticed something else. Her phone, constantly face down, her ears perked every time it buzzed. Once I saw a message flash before she quickly silenced the screen. Dev. My mind became a battleground. I wanted to confront her, to scream that I knew. But what would that accomplish? She would deny it. Or worse, twist it to make me look like the one who misunderstood. I imagined telling my father, but the thought of crushing him, of destroying the life he thought he'd rebuilt, froze me in place. Over the next few days, I became an observer in my own home. Priya and Dev no longer met in plain sight, but I sensed their connection in the smallest details. I caught her sneaking out late in the evenings, claiming to visit a friend. Once, I followed from a distance, heart pounding, and saw her stepping into Dev's house without hesitation. The door closed behind her like a secret sealing itself shut. Every time my father called, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. His voice was always the same, tired but cheerful, asking if everything was fine. I lied, over and over again. I withdrew. I stopped meeting friends, stopped studying with the same focus. The secret I carried clung to me like smoke, unseen, but suffocating. I started writing everything down in a notebook. Times, dates, glances exchanged, things said and unsaid. Not out of spite, but because I needed to feel like I wasn't losing my mind. One afternoon, while passing the living room, I overheard her laughing softly on the phone. My name slipped through her lips, followed by silence, then a whispered, "He suspects nothing." That was when something in me shifted. Not rage, not vengeance, resolve. I could no longer carry this alone. The lie had begun to rot the walls of our home, and if I didn't act, it would devour everything. But how do you tell a man that the woman he trusts most is the one undoing him behind closed doors? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing with certainty. Silence was no longer an option. My father returned on a Sunday evening just as he said he would. He walked in with dust on his shoulders and weariness in his steps, but his smile was warm. Priya embraced him casually at the door. It was a performance she had perfected. Gentle touches, soft questions, careful distance. I watched them from the hallway, a spectator in a drama neither knew I had seen unfold. My father looked content, unaware that the peace he believed he had built stood on a fault line. That night, we ate dinner together. For once, the house felt full, voices echoing off the walls. But under that illusion lay a simmering truth waiting to boil over. After the dishes were cleared and Priya went to take a shower, I walked to my father's study. He was going through some papers, glasses perched on his nose, eyes slightly heavy with travel fatigue. "Dad," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "can I talk to you about something important?" He looked up, immediately alert. "Of course, son. What is it?" I hesitated for only a second before placing the notebook on the table in front of him. Just read this. I didn't know how else to say it. He opened it slowly. His eyes moved across the pages, dates, observations, moments I had documented with reluctant precision. I saw his expression shift, first confused, then skeptical, then something else. Wounded comprehension. He didn't speak for a long time. The silence stretched, pressing against the room like a tightening grip. When he finally looked up, his voice was hoarse. Are you absolutely sure? I saw them. More than once, I said quietly. I didn't want to believe it either. He closed the notebook gently, but his hands trembled. There was no explosion of anger, no denial. Just a man suddenly aware that the foundation he stood on had been hollowed out from beneath him. Later that night, I heard them argue behind closed doors, his voice cracking, hers pleading. She denied, then accused, then wept. But something had already broken. The air was different the next morning. She didn't come down for breakfast. My father barely touched his tea. By the end of the week, she was gone. No farewell, no last glance, just silence and an empty corner of the closet. Life. After her departure was quieter, but not easier. My father moved through the house like a man learning to breathe again. I knew he hurt, but he never blamed me. In fact, one evening he placed a hand on my shoulder and simply said, "Thank you for telling me." I nodded. Words weren't necessary. Some betrayals change people. Others teach them how to see. That summer, we both learned that truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to heal a house built on secrets.